happened to me before. Okay, so once again, welcome to Money Matters. And tonight we're going to talk about consumer ethics and obligations. And the fact is that all of us are consumers, whether we are consuming from small shops, big shops, online shops, we are all consuming. And we're going to point out behaviors that we all engage in. And the challenge tonight is to think about those behaviors and what are the ethics around those behaviors, and are they ethical? And perhaps we need to be thinking a little bit differently about them. And again, the objective here is to understand what Judaism has to say. Sometimes the current moda and laws are aligned and sometimes not. And our job is to think about what Judaism has to say about that. Now, one of the things that's very interesting, what's rule number one? Come on, what's rule number one?
About what?
About anything. Rule number one is mom is always right.
Paul is always right.
Or the boss is always right, right? Or the customer is always right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Tonight, the subject matter is the customer is always right. And what happens, what's rule number two? Refer back to when you think the customer is wrong, refer back to rule number one, right? When you think mom is wrong, refer back to number one. Or when the boss is wrong, refer back to rule number one. Anyway, the point being is that we live in a society today that successful businesses are built upon this foundation of the customer is always right, and companies bend over backwards to make customers happy. We have whole industries that are designed around customer data and customer satisfaction, and so on and so forth. So let's see. I mean, I can just speak for myself, and I'm a guilty consumer, right? I have no problem ordering anything on Amazon Prime, because if I don't like it, I know I can send it back for free and get a full refund, right? So you order as many copies of whatever it is that you need, and you just return the ones you don't want. You know, you get multiple shoes, you try them all on. Now, by the way, you take Zappos, for example. Zappos was built on that premise. Their success is buy 10 pairs of shoes and return anything you don't want. So there is a culture out there that is all focused on the consumer. So let's see what is the real story around the consumer and consumer rights, and let us jump into let's start with our case study here. So Sandrine, will you lead us?
Let's see. The customer is always right. This is also called rule number one of customer satisfaction. We live in a customer-centered market economy. Never has a customer had so much information and so much power. Every company, large and small, must be thinking day and night about how to please customer faster, better, and cheaper than the competition. The first corollary of the law of customer satisfaction is, if ever the customer seems to be wrong, refer back to rule number one. The very big companies in Americas and worldwide are built on this philosophy. They have an obsession with customer service. They are continually looking for ways to please their customer better than any of the competitors, and better than even they themselves were pleasing their customer before. In every industry, the most successful companies are those for whom the customer is king or queen, and customer satisfaction is a driving force of all their activities.
Okay, so let's discuss this for a minute or two. As a customer, what are the potential problems with this?
Expectation.
How about entitlement? I mean, it's the same, along the same lines, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Mm-hmm.
So we become very spoiled in this kind of societal manner that everybody owes us everything. What else?
Isn't there a Jewish prohibition against wasting somebody's time?
Ooh, good. Great question, comment. So where does that show up? Where does that possibly show up?
False sale.
Say that again.
A false sale, wasting
False sale.
false sale, yeah. Just kicking the tires.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Well, let me just for a second, let's throw it out there. Do the store owners want to have you come in and kick the tires?
Not if you're not going to buy the tire.
Okay, good. Let's leave that open-ended for a little bit. Let's see what this has to say. Donna, jump in and read this for us, please.
Lots of people enjoy saving money by shopping online. The prices are often lower, and in many cases, there is no sales tax and little or no shipping charge. But while free market forces prevail, there are growing problems with the after effects of this market shift to internet sales. It is becoming commonplace for customers to go into a store, examine a product, get educated by a sales clerk, and go home to order the product online. Instead of feeling bad for taking the time of someone who is trying to make a living, many people feel righteous about it. They say things like, I'm not going to get ripped off, or they simply don't think about it at all. I have a friend who owns a shoe store, and he tells me that people come in all the time, try on some shoes, spend half an hour with a member of the sales staff, and when they made a choice, they announce that they're going to order the shoes online, as if it is something to boast about. Boasting to your friends is one thing. Boasting to someone who has just spent time trying to help you is rude at best.
Okay, so here we have straight up this idea of, coming into a store to find out what the price is on products. There are apps for this today, right? You can go into the store with an app, scan the item, and it'll tell you where you can get the best price. So you walk into whatever it is, you walk into Dick's Sporting Goods or into Macy's. Does that even still exist? You walk into Target, you walk into Neiman Marcus, wherever it is, you walk into Best Buy, right? And you scan an item and you want to see it. You want to make sure you like the way it looks, and the way it feels, the way it might show up. But then you have no intention of buying it. So obviously US law there's no law against it, but is it ethical? And I think, like Lisa was saying, is you're taking someone else's time. Is there something wrong with that from a Jewish standpoint? So let us, if you recall, in our first class, we spoke about something called ona'ah, which was the function of charging more than the market, up to a percentage above market one is allowed to profit, but beyond a certain percentage one is not allowed to. So that is called ona'ah. Now there are other forms of ona'ah, which we're going to learn about right now. Lisa, would you read text 2a for us?
When you make a sale to your fellow or make a purchase from the hand of your fellow, you shall not wrong one another. And a person shall not wrong his fellow, and you shall fear your God. Okay,
so the word wrong is the English translation of the Hebrew word tonu, which is the same root word as ona'ah, which is the meaning of the discussion that we had in the first class about charging above market price. I believe it was a sixth is our price we're allowed to go up to above market. So here the Torah uses the word wrong, right? And these are two different verses, or it's a continuation. Yeah, it's multiple verses. When you make a sale to your fellow or make a purchase from the hand of your fellow, you shall not wrong one another. That's once. And a person shall not wrong his fellow. So what do you notice here in this verse that requires explanation based on all the much Torah study that you've engaged with? What's with these verses? What do we need to clarify? What's the issue here? Technicality. Can you see my mouse? Yeah, I'm circling the issue.
It's repetitive?
Yeah, it's repetitive. So when something is repetitive in the Torah, what is its purpose?
To say that it's from God, the lesson?
Give me more.
It's important that there's something behind it.
So typically when we have something that's repetitive, the Torah is teaching us something, it's teaching us two separate things or two layers of the law. And here we have the lesson here is that there is what we call ona'at mammon, wronging one another with money, subject of first class, and wronging another with words, verbal harm. Okay, let's see what that really means. Let's jump into text 2. Lisa, if you can continue reading, please.
What are examples of oppressing someone with words? Do not say to a penitent, remember your former deeds. Do not say to a descendant of converts, remember your ancestors' deeds. Do not say to a convert who wishes to study Torah, a mouth that ate non-kosher meats, reptiles, and insects wishes to utter God's holy words. Do not speak unsympathetically to one who is hurting, struck by disease, or bereaved of children, as Job's friend spoke to Job. Do not say to donkey drivers who ask you for grain, go to so-and-so, who you know has never sold grain.
So here we have multiple examples in the Talmud of words that are harmful. They're hurtful. They are considered wrong and oppressing to others. So we have wronging a person with money and we have wronging a person with words. Which is worse? Which do you think is worse?
Well, the Torah is saying both are bad.
Okay. But do you have a basis to say one is worse? I won't put you in suspense because it's right here. The Talmud tells us. Lisa, you get one more.
Oppressing someone with words is worse than oppressing someone monetarily. The former is an affront to his person, the latter only to his finances. The former cannot be restituted, the latter can be restituted.
So clearly, the Talmud is telling us that the words are more harmful, sometimes even when the words can be quantified. In other words, the financial damage of the words can be quantified. So we see that there is a harm that words can, there is harm through words. But not necessarily that this harm is that the harm of words also has, one might see these as two distinct things, one in terms of harming one with words and harming one with money. But here there is an example, the Talmud says, where one can actually do both. And here is the clincher. So just as there is onah in business dealings, so there is onah in words. One should not say to a storekeeper, how much does this cost, when one has no intention of buying? So that is right back to our subject matter for tonight, right? Here clearly we see that going into a store and asking how much something costs, kicking the tires when one has no intention of buying, is a violation of the Torah's instruction about harming one with words. Now, why is it harmful when one does this?
Deceitful. It's deceitful.
Okay. What happens if I go into the store with an open mind?
Oh, if the intention is not to mislead, but to actually evaluate with the potential of maybe buying in that store, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can also mention that you've seen it, online for more, and sometimes they match it.
Let me ask you something else. If you own a store, I mean, we've all been in that situation where we've walked in without intention to buy, right? Today, you come into the car dealership and you say, I'm only coming today to just look. I have no intention of buying, right? Now, you might say to yourself that that's justified because you may actually come back and buy. But what about the store owner, the car dealership salesperson? They're okay with you coming in without the intention to buy because their job is to convince you to buy. And even if you don't come today, even though they want to make a sale today, then they're okay with you not making the sale, knowing that you've made a connection with them, that you might come back in a week and buy the car. So would you say that in such a scenario that would also fall into this Mishnah's instruction?
No, because that's the accepted mode of doing business that both sides accept.
Okay, that's a really good point. So what you're saying is that this Mishnah's rule should exclude when that is the moda of doing business in a particular society. Okay, well, let's find out if that's consistent. But one thing's for sure, we need more information around the meaning of this Mishnah, which we're going to call the shopkeeper's law, before we can really come away with something conclusive. Okay, you ready for this? Here are, hold on. I'm gonna share the ideas with you, okay? And then we'll pick up in the text in a little bit. So Maimonides, the Rambam, is of the opinion that I'm sorry, that is the correct figure here. Let's share this here. Okay, here's some of the reasons for this. So let's look around here. So we have so text A, do not hover over merchandise. If you don't have the money to buy it, this may needlessly damage the shopkeeper because no one else will buy while you are busy with the merchandise. Okay, so is this a psychological harm or a financial harm?
Financial.
Good. Next, this is from the Meiri, commentator on the Talmud. Do not ask a shopkeeper, how much does this cost, if you have no intention of buying it. As a result of your hesitation to admit that you don't want to buy, the shopkeeper will assume that the item is overpriced and will offer you a lower price. Others will overhear the lower price offer and you'll have caused the shopkeeper a loss. Financial or psychological?
Financial.
Financial. Text C, another comment from the Meiri, commentator on the Talmud. Even if no one else were present, it still distresses the shopkeeper because he had expected to make a sale but did not. Financial or psychological?
Psychological.
Good. Do not ask a shopkeeper, for what price will you sell this item if you have no desire to buy, because you are disturbing him for no reason.
Psychological.
Psychological. Finally, do not say to a shopkeeper, how much does this cost, when you have no money or interest in buying, intending instead to cause him embarrassment and pain when he realizes that you were only teasing him.
Psychological. I can tell you why I'm familiar with this, Rabbi, because I live it. As you know, I do make handmade jewelry, and I sell at craft markets. And it's a very emotional experience because, I put my all into it. So like when you read before, I happened to glance at the upcoming text where it says large companies build this into their business model. But for an individual like me, it's always emotional and financial, because like if people are touching my merchandise with no intent to buy, they could break it.
Okay, but
I've lived all of this. Yes.
you wouldn't be in business if you didn't allow people to at least browse, right?
But you want to hear something interesting?
Sure.
The pandemic, because I have to develop systems of displaying my jewelry with this lot less touch and really no touch, I'm going to be able to show my jewelry now in ways that I'll have less of that impact.
Great. One of the silver linings.
Right, but you're right though. Yes, that's why I know you have to put up with it, because you don't know, really at the end of the day, you don't know who's really serious or not.
Right, right. But here's one thing's clear. Based on the first four texts here have nothing to do with a person's malintent. In other words, a person does not have to be out to want to harm anybody, and still they have caused harm, either financial harm or psychological harm. Obviously, in text E, the person has an agenda there, but even if you don't have an agenda, it's still damaging. So let's bring this back to our situation, our scenario of browsing in what do they used to call the bricks and mortars places, browsing in bricks and mortars with no intention of buying. So as we discussed before, and based on this teaching of this Mishnah, especially with these commentators, it seems like it's pretty clear cut that nobody should be doing that it's a violation of this instruction. However, there are some considerations to be made based on these reasons, and perhaps in today's world where this has become a method of business, that this whole discussion is moot, because the stores want people to come in, because even though you came in to check out the TVs and see, the prices and the way they look so that you can go buy one online, but you might pick up a candy bar while you're there, or you might pick up a new microwave while you're at it. So the stores are okay with you coming in for that purpose, as we see here in text 4. If Terry, would you read for us?
Modern merchandising encourages customers to browse around even if they do not intend to buy. It depends in effect on impulse buying. Many of the displays in department stores and supermarkets are aimed specifically at this type of action. It would seem that large stores are prepared to pay both the psychological price and the actual cost involved in answering customers who do not intend to buy. They expect to earn in return for that from the impulse buying or by convincing the inquirer of their comparative advantage. The immorality of comparative shopping would perhaps be limited to those cases where the buyer has already made up his mind to purchase goods elsewhere and is only using the seller to gain information which can be used to drive a better bargain elsewhere.
Okay, so we see clearly from Rabbi Tamari that there is a distinction between the ancient stores and modern stores. Nonetheless, most modern day halachic authorities are not convinced that this is a pass for modern day browsing without intent to purchase. And the fact is that, like it or not, Amazon has put a lot of small businesses out of business. That's long before the pandemic. So we can't just excuse local browsing without intending to buy just simply by drawing this distinction. But remember, our objective here is not necessarily to come away with final conclusions, but to see how the method of Torah study and Talmudic analysis addresses issues in modern times. So let's do this. We're going to do a little learning activity. And what we want to do is try to incorporate the opinions that we spoke about before. We don't have to break down each one with all 5 opinions, but let's just have some brief discussion around our 5 opinions we mentioned before, why it's forbidden to engage a shopkeeper. So let's take the first one. Would it be forbidden to engage a salesperson at your local mom and shop store when you are committed to buying elsewhere? So any reasons why one would say it would be okay?
Well, it seems to be the job of a salesperson is to talk you into it. So you're giving him an opportunity to talk you into buying there.
Okay.
Rather than no opportunity at all.
So then let's go to second question. Would it be forbidden to engage a salesperson at a mega store where the sales people are on commission when you are committed to buying elsewhere?
Yes.
Why?
Because that's the caveat, I think, to your text that you read about the large stores. The large stores can afford the new model, but the salesperson is an independent entity. So he can't make up his lost time that he spent on someone that here it says is committed to buying elsewhere. So the assumption that they might be able to, sway is not part of the equation.
What about the reason we said before, one of the commentators, the reason was that other buyers might hear you give a discount, the shopkeeper give a discount, perhaps in the mega stores, they don't have the capacity to give a discount, so that won't be damaging.
I don't know if maybe I said it. I don't remember what I said. Maybe I didn't say what I meant. I'm saying that from the salesperson's point of view, he's losing his livelihood.
Because his time is being taken up.
Yes.
So I'm just going to bounce back up here for a second. So you're going with text D here. Because you're disturbing him for no reason. You're saying a little bit more than that. He's actually taking up his time. I'm putting forth text B as a counter to that in that case, because you other people are going to hear that that they offered a lower price, and others will overhear, and then you'll have caused the shopkeeper a loss. But in this case, the salespersons don't necessarily have the right to give you a lower price.
Right. I'm looking that the salesperson is an independent businessman, in a sense, because he can't rely on, he doesn't have a fixed income. So if he could make more money if he was talking to people that were really going to buy, interested in buying.
So, and then let's just throw a number 3 here. Would it be forbidden to engage a salesperson at a mega store where the sales people are not on commission when you are committed to buying elsewhere? So I think the point here is this: from these learning activities, we can take the above 5 mentioned reasons why one is forbidden to go into a store when there's no intention to buy, and some of them, again, the nuance will be in the specifics, whether the salesperson is allowed to give a commission, to give a discount or not, and so on and so forth. When the salesperson's on commission, they're giving up of their time. When they're not on commission, they're getting paid the same amount anyway. But on the other hand, you're still distressing them because they want to make a sale, because they want to feel a value, and so on. So it's not that black and white. In other words, even Rabbi Tamari's comment that we live in different times and therefore the scenarios are different, it's just not that simple. We can take these reasonings and apply them differently in each of these kind of scenarios. Now, a related question, which I threw out there before, was the idea of the new apps that you can use to scan barcodes or take pictures of merchandise. And today, I don't know if you guys ever try this. Do you ever use Google Lens? Anybody here ever use Google Lens? Okay, so no. I'm not younger than all of you, but I'm still going to teach you. This is just, it's actually quite a fascinating tool. we use it a lot, especially around like insects and birds and things. But if you go to your Google, here, I'm gonna share my screen with my phone with you. I don't know if you could even do that on the phone. They don't let you do that anymore. You guys can't see what's on my screen, right? That must be a thing that they do. Anyway, if you open up your phone and go to Google, okay? Because everybody has Google, right? So look to the right of your search box. There's like a little square made up of multiple colors with a little circle in the middle. You see it? It's not on the computer. It's only on the phone. Come on, you're going to learn. This is your tech class for your Chabad tech class.
Yes, we're on.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
You click on it. There's a screen that pops up that says Google Lens. You see it?
No.
You're muted.
Where do I look on the phone to find it?
Open up your Google browser. Open up a Google search.
Okay.
And there should be like this little box. You see it?
Oh, so then Lens, no, Google Lens?
Yeah.
No, it's shop. You mean what it has all the like Google News, Gmail, Meet, Calendar, Contact?
No. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
I did too.
So no one's really found it.
I just Googled Google Lens and it says search what you see.
Yeah. So basically, here, this is, look for this image. Here, I'm going to share my screen with you. Really, totally, you're getting like a total education here tonight. How do we do this here? Yeah. Okay, this is what you're looking for.
The men knew they'd be here.
You're looking for this image in your Google search on your phone. Okay? But the point is, when you find it, you'll thank me. So basically, you take this Google, you take that, your camera will pop up and it will say Google Lens. And you take a picture of any object. And it takes a minute, it takes a couple of seconds to recognize it, but once it recognizes it, it will then search for you. So you're walking through a store, or your friend has a beautiful piece of jewelry that you like. You do your Google Lens over their jewelry, and it'll pull up that jewelry online and show. And then if you click on the shopping tab, you'll see where you can buy that, right? So that's an extreme version of this, but it's much more simple. You pull one of these apps and you scan the barcode on an item, and it'll tell you where you can get that where you can get that item for the best price. So is that a violation of this instruction about onas devarim, damaging others with words?
Well, the business models have changed. So, I mean, it's just like you said earlier, it's kind of the way of doing business, of cost of doing business, if you want to do business nowadays.
Okay, perhaps it's let's take a minute and just look through this everybody read this one for yourselves. Okay, so what we're coming away with is very clear that, with an app, there's a lot less harm, obviously, than when you're taking up the time of a, of a salesperson. Obviously, if you're doing this online, if you're shopping online and you're visiting people's websites and seeing their prices. There's no real harm to them. Practically, you're not really taking up that much bandwidth unless you'd be shutting down their website. So clearly, there are layers. There are layers of of damage that is not necessarily as extreme as in the scenario where you're walking into the small shop and taking up the time and possibly causing the shopkeeper to have to lower his price for the next customer. But these are all really more about so what we're hearing here is that the Torah is telling us that it's not all about consumer rights. There's also consumer obligations, and I'm not allowed to harm the seller in any way when I have no intention of purchasing there. And it's just a basic idea that we need to be conscious of, because in certain instances, it really is a violation. It's an ethical violation of people's times. But there is a reality that sometimes people can convince themselves or convince others that their intentions are good. I actually came here to see maybe I'll actually buy something, when really deep down I'm just trying to match up prices. So for that we have a beautiful instruction, and let's go around here again. Sandrine, please read text 5a.
People may violate this prohibition disingenuously, for example, by inquiring regarding the price of product they have no intention of buying and declaring, "Of course I intend to buy." And the verse states, "And you shall fear your God, who knows your intention and thought." Anytime the Torah say, "and you shall fear your God," it is about a matter that human judges cannot determine.
So this is a great little passage here, connected a lot to this week's Torah portion, Mishpatim, laws, and we find a lot in this week's Torah portion these words, "and you shall fear your God," because what the Rambam, what Maimonides is telling us, is that what your neighbor may not be able to see in your heart and in your thoughts, God surely is. So what appears on the outside to be, I'm of good spirit and I have only good intention, it's really between us and God at the end of the day, what our real intentions are and whether we're acting ethically. And this is not only about the damage that it might cause the shopkeeper, even if, as we've discussed, there is a possibility that there wouldn't be a damage to the shopkeeper. It's really about us as people. And here's an interesting passage from Dennis Prager about the effect of the Torah's instructions about consumer ethics and how that affects us as people. Donna, please read 6.
This law makes us keenly aware that we have obligations even toward people we generally regard as beyond our obligation. Ever since I learned of this law as a college student, I have never regarded people who work in stores the same way as I did before. Whenever I enter a store, I am forced to recall my obligations to those working there. And I know this to be true for the many others to whom I have taught this law. This in itself makes a storekeeper law particularly useful in contemporary society. Our society is obsessed with personal rights, but it will survive only if we each adopt personal obligations. Americans are frequently made aware of consumer rights, but this law makes it clear that there are also consumer obligations. The storekeeper law also forces those who practice it to see salespeople in a different light, transforming them in our minds from individuals whose sole function is to answer our questions into individuals with feelings and hopes for earning a living. The ultimate genius of this law is that it forces us to establish something of an I to you relationship with the person behind the counter, rather than retaining the usual I-it relationship that we have with people whom we meet only in a service capacity. Finally, this law can and ought to be applied to other areas of life. There are powerful ramifications to the principle that if you know that you're not going to buy, don't imply that you might. Don't raise expectations you know you can't meet. One such ramification was made clear to me when a young woman who had heard me speak about this law in a speech told me how she wished the men whom she dated would live by the storekeeper law. So often men imply interest that is in fact not there. I can vouch for that too.
Good. So we see clearly from this law that, and Dennis Prager's comments, is that this is not just about the shopkeeper. It's really about us as people, and developing proper attitudes towards other human beings, and living an elevated life. What's interesting is that although the Torah has feedback and guidance for so many aspects of life, there is a specific emphasis when it comes to business ethics, as is actually very powerfully demonstrated in the following passage from the Talmud. Lisa, would you read for us, please?
When a person is brought to his final judgment, he is asked, did you conduct your business dealings in good faith? Did you designate set times for Torah study? Did you engage in raising a family? Did you eagerly await the redemption?
So what is interesting about this passage? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, it went from the simple to the complex.
Let's put it in different words. What would you think should be the first question that's asked? There's 4 questions. Which would you expect should have been the first question?
What does it mean, did you eagerly await the redemption? I don't understand that one.
So, one of the principles of faith is that the Mashiach will come and usher in the Messianic era. So it's one of Maimonides' 13 principles of faith, and it's an obligation that a Jew has every day to await the coming of the Mashiach. So that is the question that the soul is asked: is, did you eagerly await the redemption?
So I guess it should be reverse order.
Perhaps in reverse order, but surely, seemingly, if not the least, very close to the least important of these things is not that it's not important, but did you conduct your business dealings in good faith? I mean, I would say that, did you designate times for Torah study should be before that. Did you engage in raising a family? At the end of the day, making money is a means to an end. Why are we so focused on this as a first question? Let's do one more passage. This is Moses' blessing to the Jewish people, to the tribes before he passed on. Please, Lisa, read this one as well.
And to Zebulun, he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your departure, and Issachar in your tents.
So let's talk about who these people were. So Zebulun, his blessing of departure is because Zebulun had a shipping company. He was he lived on the seashore, and he had a shipping company. He was engaged in commerce, especially at the side of the sea. Yisachar, in your tents. Why is Yisachar in the tents? Because Yisachar was the Torah studiers. So wouldn't you think that the relationship between, now Zevulun and Yisachar had a partnership. Zevulun provided money, livelihood, sustenance for Yisachar, and Yisachar studied Torah and shared their spiritual rewards with Zebulun. Let's put it in modern terms, right? You support the rabbi, and the rabbi provides spiritual counsel. Which is more important, the support of the rabbi or the rabbi's spiritual counsel? Don't be shy, I can handle it.
The support of commerce, because you gotta pay, you gotta live.
Okay, that's the rabbi, but what's the objective?
I'm sorry?
Spirituality.
The objective is the spirituality. If we didn't need the spirituality, you didn't need to have a rabbi to support him. The rabbi got another job.
Rabbi, I got one more question on the one I read before. Isn't the first one I can't remember it, but isn't that the only one that dealt with your relationship to another person? Yeah, everything else was about you, really. Did you conduct business dealings in good faith? That is your relationships with your fellow human being.
Yeah. I just want to go back to this, Terry. So your gut reaction is good, but if we think about it for a minute, the only reason why the rabbi needs support is because the rabbi is providing spirituality. So the objective is the rabbi, being a leader and so on. It's real modern version, or actually not even modern, but throughout the ages, there's something called a kollel. And a kollel is where people study Torah. And there are some people who choose to spend their lives studying Torah, and they kind of carry the responsibility of sharing their spiritual rewards for their Torah study with those that support them financially. So it seems like the whole institution is really designed around the Torah study, not the support. The support is a necessary part of it, and yet the verse seems to prioritize the support, the business matters, over the Torah study. There's a great story that's told. It's not a true story. It's a joke, where an official of the Communist Party turns to a faithful citizen of the Soviet Union. He says, "Are you loyal to the party?" And he says, "Of course." He said, "If you had a plane or a yacht, would you give it to the party?" He said, "Absolutely." He said, "How about a car?" He said, "No doubt." He said, "How about 4 cows and 3 chickens?" So he said, "No way." So he said, "I don't understand. The yacht you would give, the plane you would give, the car you would give, but not the cows and the chicken?" He says, "The cows and the chicken I actually have."
Yay, good one.
I like that. So here's the question. The question is, what is really more important is how it shows up in real life. We can study Torah from today till tomorrow, but it's how it shows up in real life that determines whether the Torah has been internalized. We use this idea lightly, where people say, to me, being Jewish, the most important thing is being a mensch, right? Now, yes, that's true, and it's also important to keep the Shabbos and keep kosher and observe the mitzvot. But how do we know that any of that actually has taken root? We only know if it's taken root if we actually show up in our mundane business dealings. And oftentimes what happens is a person is very close to God in their own spiritual life, but when it comes to their dealings in the real world, it seems to all go out the window. And that's why the first thing we're asked when we come to heaven is not, do you designate times for Torah study? Because even if you did designate times for Torah study, let's see if that Torah study affected you. Did you conduct your business dealings in good faith? That's where it shows up. How did you treat your wife? How did you treat your husband? How did you treat your neighbor? You can be a very religious person. You can be a very spiritual person. But if you don't treat other human beings with dignity, and not only the kind of dignity that shows up on the outside where everybody knows that you're dealing honestly or dishonestly, but like we said before, what's going on inside your own heart, that's where the Torah's impact really shows up. Does this make sense? Does
Yes.
this resonate? So this is why the question in the Talmud is, first, did you deal honestly with business? And this is why Moses blesses Zebulun first, because Zebulun is the one that is actualizing, in many ways, all the teachings of the Torah. Yes, the rabbi is there to give spiritual guidance, but where does that spiritual guidance actually show up? Less relevant is how that spiritual guidance shows up in how your kitchen is being kept kosher. More, its relevance is how you treat other people. Because if you're keeping kosher in your kitchen, It's like they say, if you're being careful as to what's going in your mouth, but not what's coming out of your mouth, we're not so sure that what's going into your mouth is that kosher either. Now, there's one more layer here. And this final layer is how we conduct ourselves in business affects the world around us in terms of how others see Judaism, not as a popularity contest, but as a light unto the nations. So we've heard that expression, right? Light unto the nations. Here's where it comes from. Isaiah 49:6. I have set you as a light for nations to bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. So what does it mean to be a light unto the nations? So in this, I'm sorry?
An example.
So we're going to give an example in a minute, but first let's
No. To be a light means to be an example.
Oh, to be an example. Yes. To be an example of what though?
Of God, of who he wants you to be, an example of the light shining from God into the earth to show people how they should live.
Okay, great. And now one can say that that's instruction about which laws they need to observe, which commandments they need to observe. So we're going to dig a drop deeper into that. But you are correct. It is about being a light, a demonstration, an example of what God wants of us on this earth. But let's dig a little deeper. So in this passage of John Stuart Mill, we'll get to the punchline. I'll pull the punchline from here. And that is that we all want to get the most for the least. Bottom line, we want to invest the least amount of time, the least amount of money, and draw the greatest amount of return and pleasure from it. So this is not a God first paradigm. This is a human self-interest first paradigm. So a beautiful story. I think we're up to, Terry, did you read a second time?
No.
Please read this beautiful story.
Rabbi Shimon ben Shatak once brought a donkey from an Ishmaelite. His students went to get the donkey, whereupon they found a gem hanging on the animal's neck. They said to their teacher, "Master, the blessing of God has made you rich." Rabbi Shimon ben Shatak said, "I have purchased a donkey. I have not purchased a gem." He went and returned it to the Ishmaelite. Then the Ishmaelite proclaimed, "Blessed is the God of Shimon ben Shatak."
Let's do one more story. Terry, please close it out.
Rav Safra was selling a donkey. A person came and wanted to purchase it. At that moment, Rav Safra was reciting the Shema prayer. The person asked Rav Safra, "Would you sell it to me for this amount of money?" Rav Safra did not answer him. The person thought that Rav Safra did not want to sell it for that amount. So he raised his offer and said, "Give it to me for a larger amount of money." Rav Safra did not answer him. When Rav Safra finished the Shema, he said to him, "I decided to sell it to you as soon as I heard your initial offer. More than that, I will not take."
So these stories demonstrate this idea of being a light unto the nations, being an example. An example of what? An example of God's presence on this earth, which means that it's not all about us. It's not all about, who can, what's the expression, who gets to die with the most toys, or who, whatever, something like that. It's not about how can I invest the least and make the most? How can I put in the least and benefit the most? It's not about ripping off your neighbor. It's not about ending with the biggest bank account. It's about being a mensch. It's about being honest. It's about being ethical. It's about being there to help a coworker, not to try to step on them to get ahead. It's about treating the person, the checkout person at the supermarket with dignity. These are just some examples, of course, of how we can make this world a home for God, where God feels comfortable to rest here because we are living the teachings of the Torah, and not just the religious ones, but how the religious teachings in it, which are really about a connection with God, translate down and to make us more godly beings. A simple question we can ask is, does God feel comfortable being a partner in the transaction that we're engaged in? If we think about that, is God comfortable being in this transaction? Whether it's a promotion, whether it's buying an object, because everything we're doing here is about making the world a home for God, are we living that? Are we bringing God into that transaction? Is that what it's about? And that's why, at the end of the day, that's why Moses blesses Zebulun first, because it's how we show up in our business dealings that really determines whether we're a mensch. It's why when we come before the heavenly court, the first question is, did you deal honestly in business? That's the question. Not that you put on tefillin or light Shabbat candles. Because if you lit Shabbat candles, but you didn't deal honestly, you missed the boat. God is not that thrilled about your partnership if you lit the candles, but you were dishonest in a different context. So as much as the objective of these classes is to give us an insight into how Talmud analyzes life circumstances and so on, and modern day scenarios, the real most powerful takeaway is actually this very end of this last class, and that is, how does this translate down into our lives? How do we live a more godly life in our mundane reality? So I'm open for questions, and I hope you guys enjoyed the course, and I hope to have the opportunity to teach again soon.
Thank you, Rabbi. I always had this one question.
Sure.
What if somebody makes money not kosher manner and donates it to build a synagogue?
It's a great question. So give me specifics about the question.
They were able to make money in certain illegal ways, but they were very religious. They went to synagogue often, and then synagogue did not have a building yet, and he was able to donate a tremendous amount of money.
So what's your question? Is your question, should the synagogue?
Well, how does Judaism look at that?
Take it.
How does Judaism look at? He used a lot of the money for holy purposes. They gave the community a synagogue, and he was praised. He was never caught, but the money was pretty much, you knew that it was not kosher money.
Okay, so there's a couple of layers here. As the rabbi, or as the synagogue president, or as the synagogue board, someone who made their money dishonestly, it's very hard pressed for a synagogue to feel comfortable taking those funds in. There's a technical aspect of when does money that has been incorrectly acquired become the legal property of the thief. And again, there's also layers. There's thievery, and there's unethically, right, which may not be necessarily a violation of a technical law, but may be unethical. And then there's like someone who I don't know, this is not a great example, but someone who's I'm going to use marijuana because it's less controversial, but somebody who's making money selling marijuana, right? So you got to right, it's a big deal these days. They don't call them distilleries. What do they call them? Maybe they do call them distilleries. These pot growers, right?
Oh.
In the Midwest, right?
Dispensaries. I think it's dispensaries.
Thank you, dispensaries. So, somebody who's making money that way, and then that person, makes a ton of money and wants to start supporting a synagogue, you have to be very careful how that looks to the community. And then especially when it's something that if it's a violation of a society's ethical instruction, I don't know. I had a scenario where a guy, not me, but I know of a scenario where a fellow made a lot of money in the pornography field, and wanted to contribute to Jewish institutions, right? So it's very uncomfortable. The whole concept is uncomfortable, right? So there's a couple of layers here. There's the technical, when is this money technically not really the ownership of the individual? And you have like Bernie Madoff, for example, who gave a lot of money to charitable institutions, but it wasn't his money, right? So there was, I remember, I don't know what the conclusions were, but there were a lot of institutions that felt like they had an obligation to return the money to whatever fund was being used to compensate to whatever extent people that had lost money on that, because it wasn't his money, as opposed to somebody who earned money unethically. The law may support that at the end of the day, it's their money, even if it's unethical. So the money technically is theirs. It still doesn't necessarily mean that the synagogue should take it. Then there's another layer when the money is from a let's say a place that's unethical. Does the synagogue want to, identify with that person? So obviously there's no fast and hard answer on this, but clearly this class and has provoked at least some thinking around this that we have to take into consideration. And it should not be a simple thing that we just say, well, it's money and holy institutions, so therefore, we should bypass any considerations. Of course not. These are real questions that need to be taken into consideration when we make decisions around these things.
How do you refuse money? How as a rabbi would you refuse money from somebody? He's never been convicted, or they have never been convicted of a crime. So how would you handle that? What reason would you give to that person not to accept their money?
Look, I've never been in that situation. But I've got a family member who has a donor who's a very manipulating and controlling person. And I've told my brother that I would never accept money from a donor like that. I would simply say, find some other cause. I don't want your money because you're manipulative. This would actually be easier for me. If somebody came along and earned money unethically, I would say, listen, you're a fellow Jew. I love you. I care for you, but I can't use your funds to serve the community. Again, what I would do is I would actually, I would never make a decision like that exclusively on my own. I would always consult with senior rabbis to understand what the actual halachic framework is around a decision like that, to make sure that I'm not acting, from a place of self-righteousness, and make sure that and then whenever I find myself in a situation where I'm uncomfortable with owning the decision, I consult with senior rabbis, and once I have that input, I'm relieved, because it's Jewish law that's telling me how to behave. I don't have to own that decision. Jewish law owns that decision.
Okay, thanks.
I welcome the challenge.
Unfortunately, I can't give you that. No, fortunately, I cannot give you that challenge.
Well, thank you. Good. Thank God. Look, hopefully we never have to actually have that challenge, because people will deal ethically, and there's plenty of good people that do support the work of both our Chabad Center and many others, and they are good people that have earned their money ethically, and and if they haven't, they don't tell us that, and we don't know it. So that's also makes life easier. All right, folks, this has been fun. You know where to find me. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to studying with you all in the future.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was fun.
Great.
All right. Have a good night. Take care.
Good night.